Hello everyone and welcome to our special webcast, Knockoff Phone Forensics. Some handsets aren't what they appear to be. I'm Jason Keeler with the SANS Institute and I'll be moderating this webcast. Today's featured speaker is Heather Mahalik, Senior Digital Forensic Analyst at Basis Technology. Before I turn things over to Heather, the Q&A portion will take place at the end of the webcast. However, please feel free to submit your questions at any point by using the chat window. Right now I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Heather Mahalik.
Hello everyone, I have the video up, so I'm not sure if you're able to see or not. Jason, can you see?
Yep, you're good.
Excellent. I'll let it run just for a few slides so everyone can become familiar with who I am, and then I'll actually close it out to increase the bandwidth. All right, so knockoff phones. Not all of you may have seen knockoff phones at this point, but at some time in your career they will probably cross your desk. Typically, they're handsets containing media chipsets. What this means, if you have a computer, inside that computer is a hard drive. All cell phones have a chip on the inside, and those are essentially chips. We just refer to them as different chipsets. Qualcomm is the leader currently, and MediaTek is second. MediaTek not only sells chips for knockoff devices, but also Androids will have them as well. So you may come across a phone that has a MediaTek chip that isn't a knockoff device. So speaking about knockoffs, they're frequently found all over Asia. However, we have seen them cross borders in the United States, and they are common in knockoff phones. So common knockoffs you may see, and you can see the list there. It'll be a Nokia instead of a Nokia, an LC instead of an LG. The Skyphone is one of the common iPhones, and I actually have one here that I'll show you on the camera before I switch the slide. And then the Ophone OS is the new Android knockoff device. So how do you spot this? When you get a cell phone as part of an investigation, how do you know if it's a knockoff or is it a true phone? So the name is usually easy. So if you see Nokia versus Nokia, that's obvious. If you look on the far top right of the screen over here, you can see the GooPhone, which looks identical to the iPhone 5. And actually, the manufacturer in China of the GooPhone is going to sue Apple, saying they claimed and stole their model. However, I have a phone here that I know the camera's not the best. This is an iPhone. It looks like an iPhone. It comes across your desk. If you turn it over, you can actually take the back off. You can see the SIM card in it, and the bottom, the data port, no longer matches a normal iPhone data port. So that falls into the category of it just doesn't feel right. Something's off. Usually they have a stylus, the cable doesn't fit, or they have an antenna. And when I say an antenna, I mean something about as long as 12 to 24 inches. It looks like an old TV with rabbit ears coming out of these phones. Another indicator that you'll see at the bottom right is the multiple SIM card slots. So most of us are used to seeing GSM phones with one SIM card inserted in it. If you see multiple SIM cards, it's usually a clue that it might be a knockoff device. And I'm turning off the video to keep this bandwidth going here. Another example of not all knockoffs are created equal. So you can see the fun race car phone on the left-hand side of the screen there. That would be extreme. Most people wouldn't see that and think, hey, maybe this is an iPhone. If you look at the right, though, the Samsung Galaxy S3 looks exactly like the knockoff. So the knockoff is in the person's right hand, and then the left hand is the actual phone. The data stored on these devices, common to normal handsets, and I should say common to smartphones in specific, because anything you can do on a computer these days, you can now do on smart devices. So that includes also getting malware. So if you think you can just get malware on computers, if you access the internet or download applications to your handset, you will get malware on your devices. You'll have Bluetooth pairing when people use it with their car or pass videos and pictures using Bluetooth. And then obviously internet history, pictures, videos, everything else you're used to seeing. So an acquisition overview, for those of you that are used to regular forensics, this is very similar to cell phone forensics. So logical would be like plugging in a USB flash drive and copying the folders. So it's just what the user sees. It's nothing deleted. The physical is actually the raw hex dump of the data. This would be using a forensic tool and getting a raw or DD image of an actual device. The deleted data is usually resident there, and the reason I have the star by the logical is it may pull deleted files that are not easily accessible. So you actually have to dive a little deeper and do data carving to find those devices, and I'll talk about that in the analytical section. The physical data, one thing to know, the deleted data is recovered. It's not always easy to get the data out, and the data may not be parsed by the tool. What that means is your tool might provide physical access and then just give you all the raw hex, and you're expected to go through and manually carve these items out. And I can speak to that as well in the analytical section. And one final point there, your SIM card is not acquired via the handset ever on knockoff devices. So if there is a SIM card, you have to do acquisition on those separately. The tools for logical support, Microsystem Xray and Celebrate UFED are two of the very common ones. EDEC came out with Tarantula about 2 years ago and provides logical support as well. The physical support, you can see the same ones, Celebrate, Tarantula, and Xray Exact, which is just the physical portion. Celebrate had an add-on called the Chinax, and I'll discuss that. I actually have some examples. And then there are cheap flasher boxes that are actually made in China that you can purchase, the Spider-Man, the Dragon Box, the Piranha, and these are much cheaper than the logical and physical kits, but they also were not developed to do forensics. So an example here of a tool not developed to do forensics. This is an example of Spider-Man. So this software runs in the background. And one thing that you can see here, the flash button and the read button are side by side. So if you have an inexperienced examiner that plugs in a phone and accidentally selects flash or format, they're going to overwrite the evidence. So it's obviously not a safe platform. These were not developed to do forensics on these devices. They were developed to repair broken devices. However, we just utilize this in a forensic platform to read the raw data off. Something like Spider-Man and these other flasher boxes only provide acquisition. They don't provide analysis at all. The Tarantula, made by EDEC Forensics, it's a hardware software package that comes in all-in-one kit that you can see in the picture. It will acquire and analyze the data. It's similar to Spider-Man and other flasher boxes in the software format. However, it does do analysis. And it not only supports the MediaTek chip, it also does the Spreadtrum and MStar and Infineon. So those are the other chips that are seen in knockoff, but they're not as common. I wanted to point out that there is a new release that came out in December, and I have not tested that version, so they may have increased their capability. So if you have any specific questions about any of the tools I'm talking about, I have tested them and have experience with them, but I don't have experience with the latest release of this tool. Microsystem Xray Exact. Logically, I believe this is the best tool to acquire knockoff devices. It's strictly a software package. It does not require you to have an add-on. It's just included with your licensing. They will use custom bootloaders and different detection methods to acquire. However, we usually find that the automatic mode, you just turn the Bluetooth on the knockoff, connect the cable, and hope for the best, and let the kit tell you which way it actually works. But then again, remember, this is the best for logical acquisition, which means it's not a full dump of the device, and it's not going to get all the deleted data. So leading into Celebrate Chinax. In my opinion, this is the best tool that's available right now to get a true physical acquisition of a knockoff device. However, this is not cheap. It's about $12,000 in total. So compared to the flasher boxes that are about $100, $200, that's usually where company money and your budgets come into play. So you can see in the picture there, it's a hardware software package. It's an add-on to Physical Analyzer. It comes with a specific little enhanced phone adapter that connects in between the phone and the UFED itself. And then it does something that's called Pinout Detection, which I actually have a picture of that's connected in the next slide here. So this is an Android knockoff, and you can see the box that's in between the enhanced box right there, and then it connects to the UFED. So what is happening in this picture is these little adapters actually do pinout detection. And what that means is it's going into the data port, and it's actually throwing charge at each pin to see what it actually needs to pull all the data through the device. These devices can be damaged. They may be missing a battery. They do not have to be powered on because you actually use, you can see the red and black cables in this picture here are used to power on the device. So the device is powered with the jumper cables where the battery connects, and then the data port goes through to create a physical acquisition of the handset itself. This is a picture of the UFED in that exact same phone, that Android knockoff. And you can see it's starting to read a file. It creates a raw NAND image for us, and it usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes to get a full physical acquisition. So for anyone who has done a physical acquisition of, say, an iPhone, you know it can be 32 to 64 gigabytes in size, depending if it's an iPhone, an Android, what you have. Those dumps are similar to the size of old hard drives. So it's not easy to look through and go file by file. The knockoffs, however, they can be as small as 4 megabytes and as large as 512 megabytes, which is extremely small in the scheme of forensics and looking through data. So this is good for you if you have to manually carve everything. However, most people prefer not to do that. For analysis, moving into this, limited support, and I have a question mark there. A lot of people advertise that they will pull everything off these physical dumps and logical dumps of these devices. However, I'm going to show you what's actually missed and where to manually recover this data. Another thing to remember, and this is true for all mobile device forensics, one tool will not report all the data. It may require manual examination, and it always requires verification. So it's not as easy as saying, hey, my lab always uses NCase to do hard drives, or we always use FTK. You have to use more than one tool or you will miss data. When we teach 563, right now we always have people ask, why can't you just teach one tool? And it's because there isn't a tool out there that can do the job for all the devices. Now, I mentioned NCase and FTK. So branching outside of mobile device forensic tools, these knockoffs can actually be put into USB disk mode and acquired with FTK and NCase. They can also be examined in FTK and NCase because they have fat file systems. So moving on with the fat file systems, the data storage and how everything's laid out on these knockoff devices, there's a flash translation layer which maps all the blocks to the sectors. The issue with this is from the devices we have seen in my lab, we've already determined 3 different variations. That is why these tools have issues pulling out the data. So if it's not consistent, it's not just like a standard iPhone every single time, and they know where the data is stored. Each one may have one of 3 different variations. You may have a tool that only supports one variation. It may acquire the other 2, but not provide an analytical output for you. The sectors that the flash translation layers lead to create a disk, which looks like exactly like 2 fat file systems. And you'll get to see those partitions in the upcoming slides. And then again, just like fat file systems, deleted data is there. It may have just lost its parent file, so you just have to know where to carve for it and look in the old sectors to recover that data. All right, so each of the partitions. And this is pretty standard across most knockoff devices. Now, one thing to remember, knockoffs are created every single day. There's thousands of those created. A vendor may create 5 of one and never create those 5 again. So each one that comes across your desk in an investigation may be different. They all have these 2 partitions, though, which provides us some similarities. So you can see partition 1 is standard user created files. Partition 2 is usually how the user connects to the device, transfers files, and uses any internet connection, and also some messaging is in there. Now I'm going to break down each of these a little bit more for you. So why do you care about this? Where are you going to look if you have to manually carve these devices? For phone book data. So phone book being your contacts. There are 2 locations that you may see. And you can see here in this NVRAM, this is actually from partition 2. So now we're looking at partition 2. And there are 2 files within there that you can examine where the phone book information is stored in plain text. For anyone who has taken FOR 563, our mobile device forensics course, you know that data stored on cell phones is stored in different formats based upon the device. So there's 7-bit encoding, there's reverse nibbling. On these knockoff devices, you do not have to deal with that. So everything is stored in plain ASCII for the phone book. And you can see as well, when you look at these files manually, they contain fixed lengths, so it's never a guessing game. So the name, the number, it's always the same on these knockoff devices for these 2 files. For SMS messages, again, we're in partition 2. They're stored in raw formats. You will see MMS are stored in partition 1, SMS in partition 2. So again, you're going to have to examine these files and verify that your tool is pulling all the data out. And it's in raw format, so you don't have to do any decoding of the message itself. The Bluetooth information, and this one's really important. This is one of the most commonly missed items from all the commercial tools across the board, is the Bluetooth information is stored in MP25_000, and you can actually find this in NCASE and FTK. You can just navigate to that file or do a keyword search for that file, and you'll be able to find all the Bluetooth pairings. And I do have an example of that I'll be showing you in a few minutes. For call logs, on half the devices we've seen, the call logs are only on the SIM card, but it's been pretty inconsistent. Unfortunately, there's not an exact location where the call logs are stored when they're also synced with the phone memory. So what we do is examine each of the files just to make sure we're not missing that data. And then again, calendar and task items fall under the same thing. It depends on the device on where they're stored. For more on files commonly missed by commercial tools, the screenshot here is taken from Celebrate Physical Analyzer with the Chinax add-on. So you can see on the right there, you can actually see the file system with the 2 partitions. And each of the partitions contains the folders. You can see the deleted web cache. It puts the red X similar to NCASE and what we're used to seeing when it marks deleted versus active. The items that are usually missed by all the commercial tools, so this includes Tarantula, Celebrate, and Xray. The Bluetooth connections, what was passed through Bluetooth, wireless access points that were accessed, and then the MMS messages and the attachments. So sometimes you'll get the actual just MMS message if I send a text message with a picture attached. However, it will be missing the attachment. So you can actually dig into these folders and you can go in and examine them manually. So validating your findings, what to do. So now you have physically acquired, hopefully, a knockoff device, and your tool is either providing you some data or no data. If you're getting provided no data, you're looking at a raw hex dump. You can always put the file in NCASE and FTK and try to mount the file system, and that will give you some pointers. But we also suggest using a mobile device forensic tool that is built to parse these file systems versus just a standard forensic tool because data might be missed. Physical Analyzer actually has what they call plugins. They're essentially Python scripts that run and that you can customize to run against phones to look for data where you know it should be. So these tools, Physical Analyzer was built to do contacts, call logs, SMS, all the email, and Bluetooth information, whereas NCASE was primarily built to do hard drives before Neutrino came out introducing the cell phone aspect of it. So make sure you don't just get stuck looking in one tool, that you're validating your results. And again, I can't stress this enough, the data set is small, so you should examine all of the files for relevance. If something isn't pulled out, if you are not seeing call logs, and you turn on a device and you see a call log on the device by manual examination, something's wrong. You should be able to find those in the raw data set. And then one final thing, so these are Chinese knockoffs. So you should expect some form of translation to be required. Be cautious if you're fumbling around the phone trying to do manual examination that you accidentally don't destroy or overwrite data by clicking on buttons and not being able to read what you're actually doing on the device. So this was an example again of Physical Analyzer. Now earlier I mentioned that you can go up and look at the file system. So here, up top, you're going to see images. So that area right there, that's the raw hex. If you wanted to look at raw hex in Physical Analyzer, you would just double click on that images, and on the right-hand side, it would show you all the raw hex. Under that, you'll see the memory ranges and file system. So the file system gives you access to all the files in that file system, such as ENCASE would provide the data to you. Anything that is not listed under the analyzed data right here, which you can see the call logs, contacts, and SMS messages, it doesn't mean that's all that's there. What that means is that's what the tool knows how to present to you, and then you have to dig for everything else. So you would actually have to go in and dig for the Bluetooth and all the internet history and the MMS messages, because they do reside in that file. So right here, what we're looking at in this example is the exact same slide that I showed you here. So you can see the MMS messages actually reside there. They just aren't pulled out by the tool. So Celebrate just doesn't know how to present that data to you. Another little bonus tip that's on this slide here. So the user code, the 1122, this by default is the lock code for Knockoff Devices. So if you get a Knockoff device and you have to unlock it, you could use that code. However, most of the tools actually start the acquisition before the phone boots up, so it's not required. So if you use Tarantula or Xray or Celebrate or one of the flasher boxes I discussed, the phone's actually off when you begin. So as it boots, it just installs custom bootloaders to bypass the passcode regardless. But if the phone were locked, your tool should report to you what the lock code was. So if you needed to do manual verification, you could go in and do that. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, we'll continue. So digging a little deeper into Physical Analyzer here, you can see on the left-hand side, now I'm looking at the SMS messages. The red X's down the line here mean that those are all deleted messages that were recovered from these physical dumps. You can see under the body itself, some are in foreign language and some are not. So ideally, you would use a translator if required, or maybe your organization has some type of translation tool that you are required to use, but you want to actually make the body and the message context make sense, so you want to put it in the language that you're used to seeing. You can actually keyword search within Physical Analyzer as well, and that's something that we dive deeper into in 563, and if you're interested in doing that, that's something you would want to learn more on these tools, how to use them as analytical platforms. All right, so now we're bouncing over to ENCASE. So this is the exact same file. This is actually that Android. All these slides I've been showing you are all that knockoff Android. So here, I loaded the file into ENCASE, and you can see I just actually dragged it in as single files. You can see the exact same partitions that you saw in Physical Analyzer. One thing I wanted to point out to you. So in the NVRAM, I went into the NV data file and down into the MP25 that holds the Bluetooth information. The first, if you're looking at the raw hex at the bottom here, the first address is always the address of the device. So you can see here in the picture how it's actually converted. So the bytes are highlighted and then it's actually read in reverse. So I have the highlighted bytes listed and then the translation on how it's supposed to look. And again, anyone who has used ENCASE or has taken 408 or any of the courses, you know how to bookmark in here. But you can also, what we do is look in ENCASE, find these items, and then look in Physical Analyzer and verify them. You can also, if you have anyone that you work with or if you have the capabilities yourself, build custom parsers that will do this type of information for you every time. So if you have an engineer that can write some code for you, we have programs that when we get physical acquisitions of knockoff devices, we run it every single time and it pulls out all these missing items that we know where they're located. So the examiner just has to go in and verify the results. They don't actually have to go in and manually carve those. So now some exceptions. So essentially, when everything I just told you may have been a lie or may not have been required. And you can see the little Android man standing here with MediaTek. So the only exception that we're aware of right now, knockoff Android devices. The hardest thing is determining, is it a true knockoff or is it an Android device? The reason being is Android devices are adopting the MTK chips. So if you took the phone apart, you may have a knockoff that has the exact same chip as the standard Samsung Galaxy S3. The reason they're doing that is because they want faster processor, better graphics, just all the speed that's involved. And MTK is cheaper than Qualcomm. So the chip is cheaper, and that's why they're going that direction. There are several devices that already exist of the knockoffs. The most popular one that we're aware of is the O phone. So it's the Android knockoff, it's not the iPhone. And there are more on the way. And the reason we know this is these manufacturers are pumping these devices out as quickly as possible. So if you have an Android knockoff, one thing you might be able to do is acquire it using normal Android techniques. So your logical tools that you normally use, such as VIA Extract, which is a great Android tool by VIA Forensics, it might be able to acquire this device logically in a similar manner. It will usually require you to root the device, and that's usually where a knockoff versus a normal Android will differ. So on a knockoff, you might not be able to get root access using these manual techniques. And then if that happens, you should just do physical acquisition regardless because it gets all the data. Okay, so I see a question here. Let me read this and I will respond. So the question is, so knowing that a mobile phone can be seized and can have its contents dumped, how are bad guys disposing of destroying mobile phones in such a way that the contents cannot be acquired? Excellent question. So most people are wiping their devices. So let's branch away from knockoffs for a second. If you have an iPhone, an Android, or a BlackBerry, if you wipe it, so if you have a BlackBerry, if you enter your password incorrectly 10 times, it will wipe the device. We've done testing where we physically acquire the device before and after it's wiped and truly see that the device isn't overwritten with zeros. It's actually just put back in a standard format, and all the user data is fragmented in a way that it can't be put back together. The iPhone and Android work in similar ways. So if you have a 32 gig iPad and you log into Find My iPad or Find My iPhone and you wipe it, it will take about 30 seconds to wipe it, and it truly does fragment all the user data. If anything, you may get the user's bookmarks or something that saves, but all the other user contents will be overwritten. So that is by far the best way for a criminal to truly get rid of their data. We, once we get our hands on it, can prevent that by putting these in Faraday solutions and doing airplane mode and cloning SIM cards, which is also something we teach in our mobile device forensics courses. We see others that are dipping their phones in water, trying to manually destroy them with hammers or screwdrivers, and there are ways around that. We can do mobile device repair. We can actually take the chips off these devices. So there are ways around it. It just depends on the status of the device when we get it. Does that answer your question? Okay, so that covers knockoff forensics. Now I know everyone always wants more on this. The best way to learn anything about any of these devices is to get your hands on them and actually look at the dumps and try to parse the data on your own and get familiar with the mobile device forensic tools. So there are courses out there that offer this. The mobile device forensics course is 563 offered by SANS. And we go through how to handle these devices, acquire the devices. For those of you who have taken 563, which I know some old students in here, and who are looking for something more, we are developing a new smartphone course. It's going to be called 585, and it's going to focus more on all the data carving and advanced analysis techniques instead of the acquisition. So the acquisition capabilities will still be available, but we're going to force you to validate your tool, to dig deeper than what your tool will give you. And the knockoff section will actually be a part of that course. If you have not seen a knockoff and you're expecting to, obviously you'll see these slides. You can always contact me. My information's up there. My email address is available. My Twitter address is there. Cindy Murphy and I are actually teaching in Orlando at SANS 2013, and there are seats available still. It's coming up in March, and you can actually get a 10% discount if you use the discount code DFIRcast10. And if you need information on this, you can email myself, you can email anyone from SANS, and they'll be able to get this to you.
Hello,
so if anyone has any questions?
Oh, I was
sorry,
just going to, that's okay. I was just going to open the floor to the Q&A portion of the webcast. If anybody has questions, please feel free to type those to moderators through the chat window.
Chad, sorry that you joined in late. It started at 1 o'clock. If you scroll up, you can actually see that the slides are available, and you can get those, or you can contact Jason or myself or someone from SANS, and they'll help you.
And we have one question. John asks, I heard there might be a SANS 564. Is that still the case?
There actually is not going to be a SANS 564. I believe the number was already in use, so it's going to be 585. So anyone who has taken 563, which is the mobile device forensics course, the same one that Cindy and I are teaching in March, it will be all new material. It's solely focused on smartphones. So we're dropping all of the basic simple phone concepts from the course, although if you can physically acquire a smartphone, you can physically acquire a simple phone. So you wouldn't be missing out on anything by not taking 563 first, but you will be gaining a lot of knowledge. It's going to be a 6-day course. The capstone will take up the final day, and it's focused on Androids, iPhones. We do a little knockoff, Symbian phones, BlackBerry, Windows Mobile, so all the latest and greatest smartphones that people are seeing and having issues with.
And we have another question. I wonder about criminals looking to these specifically to help foil forensics investigators. Have you seen or heard of anything like that?
Well, it depends. I attended a law enforcement course where a man in the class was arrested for child pornography. So he was obviously in the class learning how to hide child pornography. So it obviously can occur. And honestly, every single time we teach, you never know what people have in their back pockets or which defense attorneys are sitting in there to learn. But everything that's out there on how to destroy these phones and damage them, you see them on YouTube, you can Google it, it's all public knowledge. We just have to be a little bit smarter and figure out how to deal with it after it's already been damaged or wiped.
And our next question, how long does it take to wipe an iPhone if the police are at your door?
It can literally be as quick as 30 seconds. And then the key is if you are the police or if you have a device in your hand and it starts to wipe, a BlackBerry or an Android would be a perfect example, rip the battery out. Because once you rip the battery out, you have stopped the wiping. So then you could take the chip off the device, which if you're not aware of what that is, that's actually going in and removing the physical memory chip from the phone, and then you acquire it through advanced methods. It's not a cheap solution, it's not easy, but people can do that. If it's an iPhone, people have suggested taking a hammer to it to kill the device so the chip still remains intact, but the wiping doesn't occur. But it can be as fast as 30 seconds.
And we still have a couple minutes. If you would like to have any questions answered, please type those to moderators through the chat window. Thank you.
So Thomas, your question, is the old microwave track, does it still work? I honestly can say I have never microwaved a phone and then tried it. So if you would like to microwave one and mail it to me, I will try to recover your data. That would be fun.
Thank you so much, Heather, for your great presentation and for bringing this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we really appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.